Okay, so let's move on to the next topic, emotions, stress, and health. Emotions. The first question in the topic of emotions, are facial expressions are universal? Okay. According to Paul Ekman, it is yes. Because what he did was he showed these 7 pictures to, those are European-looking people, and they make different expressions. And Paul Ekman, he showed these pictures to a group of people who never seen any Westerner, and to ask them to discriminate which expression they are. It could be happy, disgust, fear, disgust, happiness, surprise, contempt, anger, and sadness. Which one is which? And they found the identification result from those New Guinean people are the same, exactly the same as the results adopted from Westerners. So he claimed that facial expressions are universal across culture. Okay. For those expressions like happy, disgust, surprise, these are very distinct. These are very distinct expressions. Probably they are universal, but even they are universal, there seems to be some emotional dialects. When we are talking about dialect, it means that they are just some minor difference between different cultural groups. So they compare these people from Hungary, Japan, Poland, Sumatra. Sumatra is one part of Indonesia, okay, US and Vietnam. And they found that the Japanese seems to be worse at identifying anger, and the Vietnamese seems to be worse at identifying disgust. So maybe there is still some subtle difference among these groups. And if you examine how people judge expressions, and there seems to be a tendency that for people from Eastern culture, okay, people from Eastern culture focus more on the eyes when they are judging the expressions, whereas for people from Western culture, they seems to be spread their attention across the whole face. And the other thing which I find interesting is they compare people from the US and people from Japan. And they basically, it's a questionnaire study. What they did was they just list several expressions like women should be able to tolerate pain in most circumstances, or it is acceptable for men to cry when in pain. They just wrote down a lot of descriptions like these, and they gave these descriptions to those participants and asked those participants to judge, how do you feel about these descriptions? How do you feel about it is acceptable for men to cry when in pain? How do you feel about it? Do you think it's appropriate or inappropriate? And what they found was, if you compare the Japanese and Americans, they seem to indicate less approval for open emotional expression of pain. Okay. And if you think about this result, I believe that not only for the Japanese, but probably generally in the Eastern Asia, you can still find this kind of tendency, because like in Chinese, there is a term we use a lot in Chinese, like 忍耐, 忍耐, huh? And when you talk about 忍耐, actually it's not something, somehow it's positive. When you describe someone who can 忍耐, somehow it feels like it's a compliment. It's not something bad, it's a virtue that you can somehow tolerate the pain. But if you try to find 忍耐, I'm not sure, but my feeling is it's really hard to find a direct translation of 忍耐, at least in English. The closest one could be tolerate, but it's not really tolerate. It's something more than just tolerate. 忍耐 means that when you are in pain, but you still hold on, that kind of thing. But probably doesn't really exist in the Western culture. So probably the feeling, the emotion of 忍耐 is more unique in the Eastern culture, probably. Okay. So, although in terms of facial expressions, you can find a universal, like people generally discriminate facial expressions in the same way, regardless of the culture. Okay. The next question is, so where does emotion come from? Why do we have emotion? Why do we feel happy? Why do we feel sad? Why do we feel fearful? Why do we feel anxious? An intuitive thinking is because there is a stimulus. The stimulus is something scary. There is something scary. And then because of this scary thing, it triggers your emotion. So you have the emotion of fear. Okay. And then because of the emotion of fear, you start to have physiological responses, something like higher breathing rate, higher heart rate, higher blood pressure, okay, and sweating. These are physiological reactions which are triggered by emotion. Okay. This is an intuitive way to think about why we have emotion. But previous studies have shown that no, it's not like that. Actually, our physiology comes much, much faster than our emotion. In most of the cases, when we come across something scary, like this dog, it is barking at you, so it's scary. This scary thing, it will actually trigger the physiological response firstly. And the emotion actually comes, if you compare the time it takes, the conscious emotion, actually in most of the cases, it comes after the physiological response. So James Lange, according to their theory, it is not that emotion generates or leads to physiological response. It is the physiological response that causes emotion. You feel fear. It is not because of the dog. It is because of your physiological response. So if you can change your physiological response, then you can remove fear. So according to James, if you want to conquer your emotion, for example, if you are going to give a presentation and you feel nervous, and the only way you can conquer your anxiety is you have to pretend that you are not nervous. How to pretend? Because usually when we feel nervous, those responses are, we tend to breathe faster. We tend to, our heartbeat becomes faster. So if you can somehow slow down your breathing, and it could reduce your anxiety. Okay. The reason is because our emotion is not triggered by the environment. Our emotion is triggered by our physiology. Okay. This is James Lange theory. Okay. The next theory, Cannonball theory, which is slightly different. According to this theory, the physiological response of emotion and the conscious feeling of emotion, they are separate. They could be irrelevant. Okay? When you see something scary like this dog, the signal will be sent to your subcortical brain activity. It will be sent to your brain, but not the conscious brain. The conscious brain is the cortex. Subcortical is those regions which are not your consciousness. And when the information is sent to the subcortical region, then it will send to two directions. One, to your physiology, to your peripheral nervous system, which causes your heartbeat, your faster breathing. And the other way goes to your consciousness. But the two pathways, they are separate. There is no causal effect between the two. Okay. According to the previous one, James Lange, there is a causal relationship because the conscious fear is caused by your physiology. But the Cannonball theory, they are irrelevant. They are just two separate pathways. And the next one, which is also the one we are going to spend more time on, which is cognitive appraisal theory of emotion. According to these kind of theories, the reason why we feel emotion is because we have the physiology first. We have the physiological responses like faster breathing, higher blood pressure, higher or faster heart beating. We have these physiological responses first. And then your brain, your consciousness, your cognitive system is trying to look for the reasons why you have these physiological responses. And then it draws a conclusion. It could be because you are in fear. Okay, this is their theory. Let's have a look of the evidence they provide. So this evidence, this video is called The Science of Love. Love in this video is one kind of emotion. Okay? So how and why do we have the emotion of love? And actually it is an experiment. And in this experiment, this guy, he is the participant, he's the subject. And this woman, actually she is more just like an actor of this experiment. And what this experiment is involved is, this experiment is conducted on a bridge, like this suspension, this scary bridge, because it wobbles a lot, particularly on a windy day. Okay? And those subjects, those participants, they are just random people. They're walking on this bridge. And then they will be stopped by this woman. And this woman will say, okay, I'm a psychology student and I need you to fill out our questionnaire. And after the questionnaire, and that woman will also show the man a picture of another woman. And the woman will want this man to describe something about that woman on the picture. At the end of the experiment, this woman will leave her telephone number to this man, and she will say that if you still have any further question, you can call me. Okay? And then they collect the data they collected is how many of the men will actually reply, call back to the woman. Okay? This is the experimental group, and it is on a scary bridge. And there is another group. Okay, so this is experiment. Okay, one group on the scary bridge, the other group on the safe bridge, and they are doing exactly the same thing. Now, if you want, okay, what they collect after the experiment, they collect how many of the subjects will actually reply. Now, please have a guess. Okay, which group? Now we have two groups. Scary bridge and safe bridge. Which group do you think that those men will reply more? Okay. So there are two bridges, scary bridge and safe bridge. If you think for the scary bridge group, those men will reply more, raise your hands. Okay. If you think that the safe bridge, on the safe bridge, those men will reply more, raise your hands. Okay, so most people think that the scary bridge, those subjects were more likely to reply. Okay, for those who think the scary bridge, the men will reply more, does anyone want to say why you think the scary bridge will be more effective? Because in the morning, I had another class, and also I asked them to do the exactly same thing. And one of the students, I think he gave a very good possibility. One of the students, he thought that the safe bridge, those men were more likely to reply. The reason is because when you're walking on the scary bridge, you feel anxious. At this moment, whatever you see, you will associate this person with the feeling of anxiety. So you tend to avoid them. In that case, you tend to reply the woman you meet on the safe bridge, okay? Which I think makes sense. But the thing is, because according to their data,
many more phoned her that night.
The result is, for the scary bridge, there are more men who replied later at night. Okay, so the data is, yes, for those men on the scary bridge, they are more likely to reply. This is the data. And the way they explain the data is just like like what he just described. Because when you're walking on a scary bridge, you feel fearful and you have those physiological responses like higher blood pressure, faster heart beating, and faster breathing. And now your brain is trying to look for the answer why you have these physiological responses. And it happens to be a person with the right sex and with sufficient attractiveness. And then your brain misinterpret these physiological response as the attraction to that woman. So this is one of the supporting evidence of cognitive appraisal theories of emotion. This, in that case, in the case of that video, the stimulus is actually the bridge. It is the bridge that causes your physiological responses. Okay. And then your cognitive system is trying to find the reason why you have these physiological responses. And it happens to be, happens to be a woman who walks towards you. So you misinterpret this physiological responses to love feeling. Okay. So this is one of the theories of emotion. Okay. So those were theory. Okay. Now we look at what is happening in our body. We start from the peripheral nervous system. So this is our peripheral nervous system, particularly the autonomic system. Okay. In our autonomic system, we have two branches. One of them is called sympathetic. The other one is parasympathetic. 交感副交感. Sympathetic system is whenever you are in danger or in potential danger, the sympathetic system will be activated, and the consequence is your pupil will dilate and your saliva will be inhibited and your heartbeat will be accelerated, okay? And something like your bladder is inhibited. Basically, all these responses are trying to, and also your blood pressure will be higher and your breathing will be faster. The purpose of these responses is to give your muscles enough nutrition so you can react to the danger, to the potential danger, okay? When you're in danger. But the downside of the activation of sympathetic system is it consumes a lot of energy. So that's why we also need another system which can slow down your heartbeat, slow down your breathing, okay, to save more, to conserve more energy when you are not in danger. So these are when you are in danger, when you are stressed, when you are nervous, your heartbeat is up, your breathing is faster, pupil is dilated, so you can see things more clear. Okay. So that is what's happening in your autonomic system. Okay. What about the central nervous system, which is your brain and the spinal cord? In terms of your central nervous system, particularly the brain, you know the brain is a very complicated structure. And if you have ever taken course in the neurosciences or anything to do with neuroscience, and probably you will spend more time on trying to memorize all those structures of the brain. We are not going to focus that detail. We are going to just roughly classify the brain into three parts or three layers. According to the triune brain theory, triune means something to do with three. We have three layers of brain. The first layer, we call the reptilian brain, reptilian 爬虫类, because the function of this part of brain is very similar to a reptilian brain. Basically, this part of brain, it governs our survival. Okay? It controls sex, territorial behavior, fight and flight, very primitive behaviors. Okay? And evolutionarily, this part of the brain, it emerges earlier in human evolution. The next level is the mammalian brain. This part of brain, if you look at the location, it's in the middle of your brain. It's on top of your brainstem, but it is below your neocortex. Evolutionarily, it comes after your brainstem, but it comes earlier than your rationality. Okay? And it governs our emotion, particularly fear, anxiety, those negative, unwanted emotions. A very important structure in this part of the brain is called amygdala. Okay? Amygdala is our emotion center, immediate emotion, particularly fear and anxiety. For rats, if you destroy a rat's amygdala, the consequence is, you can think about if you put a rat into a maze, when a rat is running in a maze, if you give the rat an electrical shock at a certain point in the maze, just one shock, that rat will avoid to go to that spot again, because the rat would have learned that that spot is associated with electrical shock. Okay? For this kind of pairing, electrical shock and a particular point in the maze, you just need one time, then the rat can learn. But if you damage the rat's amygdala, you destroy its emotion. The consequence is, no matter how many electrical shocks you give to the rat will never learn. The reason why he never learns is because, in this case, if he doesn't have the amygdala, he doesn't have the emotion of fear, then he couldn't learn anything from fear. Okay? This is for rats. But for humans, and if you have any problem or if you have any damage in your amygdala, the consequence is you turn to take you tend to take higher risky behavior, and you will lack the feeling of fear. So amygdala is the structure that gives rise to the emotions of fear. Okay. So that is the mammalian brain. Now the human brain, the top structure of the brain, which is relevant to our planning, goal setting, and abstraction. Okay. So in a way, if you look at our brain, somehow it can be separated into the three parts: the brainstem, the emotion, and the rationality. Okay. Sometimes they don't communicate that well. Sometimes they will ask you to do different things. In that case, the human brain, some people they call it that is the new kid on the block, because it emerges relatively later in evolution. It's just like when a community or when a classroom, when there is a new kid coming into the new classroom, it's very likely that this new kid would not be accepted by the class, or sometimes the kid will be probably bullied by the class. Somehow very similar to our brain, because our rational brain they come later in evolution. So when there is some disagreement among the three brains, usually we don't really follow the rational part. We tend to follow the emotion part. So that's why sometimes you might have this kind of experiences before, that I know it's irrational, I know it's not wrong, I know it's not right, but I just feel like doing it because of some emotion. So a possible way to explain this kind of conflict is because your rationality comes after your emotion. So when there is a conflict between your emotion and your rationality, chances are you will surrender to your emotion. Okay? So somehow emotion doesn't seem to be something good. It seems to be something that kind of disturbs your thinking. Okay? But it is not always disturbing. Sometimes it could be helpful. Okay? Why does it helpful? There have been some studies showing that emotion can sometimes help our thinking. In this study, they showed the participants 3 kinds of videotapes. Okay? Back in the days, they still use videotapes. The videotapes could be positive, negative, or neutral. And the aim of these videotapes are to create emotion on the participants. After they have watched these emotional videotapes, they were shown another videotape in which, in this new videotape, some people, they deny that they have stolen a movie ticket. And the movie ticket version of videos, some of those videos are real, some of them are lying. Anyway, the task is to identify who are lying. Basically, the task for the subjects are to identify who are lying. And according to their results, that people in a negative mood, they tend to be more accurate to identify who are lying. So in this case, probably negative mood, negative emotion is helpful. But it is not always like that. Negative mood, the function of negative mood or negative emotion, they tend to sharpen the focus of attention. But positive mood, it can broaden your attention. So if you are in a positive mood, you are more likely to identify irrelevant information. Okay? Your attention is more broad, so you are more likely to notice something other people don't notice when you are in a positive mood. And this is a very important thing for creativity. So people in general, they are more creative when they are in a positive mood. So in a way, what are the functions of the negative mood and positive mood? Negative mood seems to be if you are in a negative mood, you are more likely to see only the tree, but not the forest. And if you are in a positive mood, you are more likely to see the forest, but not the trees. If you are in a positive mood, your attention is broader. You can process more things, but you can't process things in a deeper level. When you are in a negative mood, you tend to process things deeper, but it's very narrow. So negative mood and positive mood, they help you in different ways, in different situations. Another thing is, though your emotions, sometimes they also help you even when you are not really conscious of them. Okay. This task is very famous in psychology. It's called Iowa gambling task. The reason why it's called Iowa, because that task was at first, was originally developed in the University of Iowa, okay, in the United States. And let's have a look of this video. So this is the task. You are just clicking on one of the cards, and some of the cards you will win money, some of the cards you will lose money. And most of the subjects, they don't know which cards are safer, which cards are more dangerous. Actually, among the 4 decks of cards, 2 of them are dangerous, 2 of them are safer. But the difference is very subtle. Up to a point, the subjects can be aware of them. Okay. If you look at the performance, for most people, they tend to choose those safer cards. Although, if you ask them, did you find anything different among the 4 decks of cards, they wouldn't tell you that they found the difference. They are not aware of the difference, but their actions actually indicate they are somehow, they somehow can react to this difference. And in addition to that, if you measure their physiological response, GSR, which is the skin conductance response, this GSR is a device to measure how much you sweat. When you feel anxious, you sweat more. When you feel safe, then you don't sweat them more. So I can tell whether you are anxious by how much sweat you have on your fingers. Okay, and for those tasks, people, they will tell you that they are not aware of the rule, but they still tend to pick those safer decks. And when they are picking those dangerous decks, their skin conductance reveals that they sweat more. So their body somehow knows which one is safer, which one is more dangerous. And their decision also tells that they can somehow discriminate. But their consciousness, they just don't know which one is safe and which one is dangerous. Okay. Which tells us that your emotion is helping you, even you are not aware of them. But for some other people, for patients with damage in their emotional processing, they don't have the tendency to choose the safer cards. Also, their sweating response doesn't tell any difference among the 4 decks of cards. So from the Iowa gambling task, it tells us that our emotion helps us even when we are not aware of them. Okay? So in some of the cases, emotion helps us with our decision making. But sometimes if you have too much negative emotions, it might harm your health. So we are talking about another topic in psychology, which is health psychology. What is health psychology? The aim of health psychology is to understand why people and how people stay healthy. Basically, our immune system is affected by emotion. If you have too much negative emotions, the chances are it might harm your immune system and you'll get sick easily. So how should we stay healthy? One of the strategies is to don't get too nervous, don't get too much negative emotions, and it's more likely that we can stay healthy. And how could we relax ourselves when we have stress? So in psychology, in clinical psychology, there are some techniques. Okay? For example, Zen, like meditation, okay? Or yoga. Those are some of the activities that can calm you down so you can relax. Or because for Zen, for meditation or for yoga, it takes time for you to master the technique. In psychology, in the clinical setting, one of the strategies, one of the techniques that can help us get the relaxation stage easily is biofeedback. Biofeedback is a technique that when you are trying to relax yourself, your body is connected to a machine that can read your physiological responses. So you can see a machine, and that machine will tell you how fast your breathing is and how fast your heartbeat is. So you will know how relaxed you are, okay? And when you can see how relaxed you are, when you are trying to relax yourself, your body somehow can adjust in a way that you can get relaxed faster, okay? And this technique is biofeedback. Basically, this is just when you are trying to relax yourself, when you are trying to do meditation, when you are trying to calm yourself down, you can see how relaxed you are from a machine. And this technique is biofeedback. Okay. So to get relaxed is important. In neuroimmunology, okay, psychological, immunology. So basically it involves three different subjects, three different types of knowledge. And there has been some evidence that suggests that how relaxed we are, how stressed we are would actually affect our immune system. Like this study, it shows that immune function can be modified by psychological states. Or this 2009 study, people who report more stress have less antibody response. And in this study, they actually recruited a group of people. Okay, they were Alzheimer caretakers. Alzheimer, like dementia, or Alzheimer's. Their caretakers. You can imagine that their caretakers are mostly in a stressed condition. And they recruit one group of Alzheimer caretakers and another group of control group. So basically they are healthy subjects. And they gave these two groups of people, wounds, just small wounds on their skin. After a few days, they found that Alzheimer caretakers, it takes them more days to heal. Okay. So probably because those caretakers, they are mostly in a more stressed situation. So their immune system probably is weaker than the control group. So that is why probably it takes more days for them to heal. So if you are too stressed, then it's more likely that your immune system could be weaker. Okay. And why do we get stressed? And how do we get stressed? One of the possibilities is if you suppress your thoughts, it might stress you, and it might weaken your immune system. So in this study, they recruited 37 HIV positive individuals. They are positive, but because they are just those viruses just inside of their body, they still hadn't had any symptoms yet. And because this disease, it will affect our immune system. So probably if you want to get the evidence of the correlation between the immune system and psychological stress, probably the best strategy is to find HIV patients. So that's why they chose HIV patients. And these patients, they separated these patients into two groups. The first group is the emotional writing group. So for these patients, they had to write down their feelings or their thoughts about this disease, okay, in this writing group. And the logic behind this writing group is once you have written your thoughts or your feelings out, and somehow it can release your stress. Okay. So this is emotional writing group. And this is the other group, control group. Basically, they did nothing. So after a few weeks, they measured their viral load. So this is the result. This is emotional writing group, and this is control group. For control group, they did nothing. And for emotional writing, the blue bar indicates the baseline. Baseline is their viral load at the beginning of this experiment. So originally, their viral load was this level, which was similar to the control group. But when after they started this writing activity, like 2 weeks after, their viral load has been significantly reduced. Okay, and this effect can continue on to 3 months and even for 6 months. Okay. So there is a significant effect. And the logic behind this study is for these HIV patients in this writing group, because they can write down their feelings about this disease, and this can somehow relieve their stress. And the stress relief can somehow strengthen their immune system, which can reduce the viral load. Okay, and this is also another study trying to get the relationship between your stress and your health. And in this study, they classified people into type A and type B. For type A people or type A behavior, they are more competitive and they are more urgent, they are more hostile, they are always in a hurry, they are always up for something. And for type B behavior, they are less competitive, they are less urgent, they are less hostile, they are more relaxed, they are more laid back. If you look at the statistics, you can find that personality trait has high correlation with how likely they will get coronary heart disease, some kinds of heart disease. Okay. This is a phenomenon, and this is the data. The next question is, what is the crucial element for type A behavior that leads to higher likelihood of coronary heart disease? And in this research, they hypothesized that the hostility is the crucial element. Okay. Type A and type B behavior, the crucial difference is type A behavior, those people that are more hostile. So in this 2002 longitudinal long-term study, this study was published in 2002, but they started this research in 1986, and they recruited 774 male participants. And at the beginning of this research, their health condition were similar. Okay? They didn't have any cardiovascular disease at the beginning of this research. But once you have followed them, okay, at the beginning of the study, these people were classified into type A and type B because they had to do a questionnaire, and this questionnaire was so according to results of the questionnaire, and these people were classified into either type A or type B people. And then this research team followed these men, 774 men, for about 2 decades. And the results showed that the horizontal axis here denotes the percentile hostility scores. Okay? The higher the value is, the more hostile they were. And the vertical axis here denotes the episodes, the likelihood, the numbers, and the frequency of their incidence of coronary heart disease. Okay? And they found a correlation, particularly in this highest group. If your hostility is more than 80% of the general population, and your likelihood of getting coronary heart disease could be doubled than the control group, which tells you that your personality trait, particularly hostility, the trait of hostility, is highly correlated with your cardiovascular health. Okay. So basically, emotion, particularly for those negative emotions, they could help us with our cognition, with our decision making when we are in danger, when we are in a critical situation. But in the everyday life, in the real life, sometimes we are not in danger all the times. When we are not in danger, and if you still have the negative emotion, it could do harmful things on your health. Okay. So this is emotion.